Okay, this video is all about factoring polynomials and how we can take it a step further. In the past, when we've had polynomials that have been a greater power than 2, we've been able to factor them. We've been able to, take out things that are in common, and we've been able to just see, something like x to the 4th minus 16 and be able to pull that apart. What I want you to notice is there's going to be polynomials in which it won't be that simple. And there is an approach to doing that, and you can see the 3 steps on your screen right now. And we're going to do those steps together as we look through this. But I want you to know that if you can factor the easy way, I want you to do that first. What I mean by that is if you can take a common term out, if you can do something where x squared and x squared or something along those lines, that's where I want you to go first. Don't immediately jump into this and make this your number one start, because this takes a little bit longer. Obviously, as looking at these steps, you can see you're going to be testing factors, then you're going to use long division, and then you're going to solve it. So it does take quite a bit to do this. And we're going to look for ways that, hey, once I get it to an x squared equation, can I factor it? Or something like that. So I don't have to keep doing the division. All right. So today we want to make sure that we can factor polynomials by the end of this video and after tomorrow's practice. The first step in doing any polynomial is basically find one that works. Now I will tell you, especially since I'm not giving you calculators, I will probably have either 1, 2, or 3 that will divide into it. So I'm not talking like you're going to have to look through a zillion numbers here, an infinite amount of numbers. I'm thinking that if it should be divisible by 1, 2, or 3, and that is the positive or negative. So we're going to start by testing factors. Now, how do I know if it's a factor or a root? It should make it equal to 0. Good. So what we're going to do first here is I'm going to test to see if 1 will work. So what I'm going to do is inside my equation, I'm going to put 1. And what I'm looking for is, will it equal 0? So I get 1 minus 4 plus 1 plus 6. And if you did this, you'd get, you'd recognize pretty quickly this does not actually equal 0. So therefore, 1 is not a root. If you don't believe me, just add that up. You'll see that it equals 4. Okay, let's try 2. Or maybe you want to try -1 or whatever. Now there are some tricks to this too. If this was all addition, if this equation was all addition, then I wouldn't probably start with my positive roots as a choice. Simply because if it's +1, then it's just going to keep adding numbers. Doesn't that make sense? If they are negative numbers, then they might alternate depending on the power. If you want to try -1, we could actually do that. Let's give it a shot. So -1 cubed minus 4 times -1 squared plus -1 plus 6 equals 0. So it gives me -1, gives me -4, it gives me -1 plus 6. And sure enough, that gives me -6 plus 6, and that does. So that means -1 is a root. So x equals -1 is one of my answers to this, which means that x plus 1, notice I changed the sign, is a factor. That means it's going to be x plus 1 times something is going to equal x cubed minus 4x squared plus x plus 6. And that's what we know about this. Good. Okay, so now that we know that 1 works, let's try, or -1 works, let's look at the next step. Your next step in this equation process is to now use long division to determine the other factor. So what that looks like is, once I recognize that we have x plus 1 is one of the factors, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take x plus 1 and I'm going to divide it into this equation and discover what the other root is. Now this is not a lesson on division, but I'm going to actually show my work as I'm working through this so that you can see, but I'm probably not going to talk you too much through that. But the idea is that we want to know what this would equal. So of course we have the x squared. And the number one mistake, we have to remember to change the signs. Have to remember both of them. And so there it is. X squared minus 5x plus 6 is the other factor. So what that looks like is we have x plus 1 times x squared minus 5x plus 6 must equal this. So what we want to do is we want to see, can I factor this? Notice I'm not looking to do long division again. I'm looking to see if I can factor. What two numbers multiply to give me 6, and at the same time I'll add to give me 5, and of course that's 2 and 3, and they're both the same sign and both negative. This is what equals 0. Now we can solve, and this is the third and final step. So I'd get x equals -1, as we know, x equals 2, and x equals 3. And that would be your answer, all three of those factors. I will tell you as a word of caution that many times when people factor, they forget the initial 1 that they found. In other words, when they found that x equals -1, they forget to mention that as being one of the roots. So don't forget that. Make sure at the end you incorporate that into your final answer some way. Okay? Great.